I thank you for spending your afternoon, part of it anyway, with me. It's an honor to be here, and I know you have many alternatives for use of your time. So the fact that you're here to benefit from what I might say today says a lot about who you are. It speaks volumes, frankly. So thank you for your time. And to all the mothers, happy Mother's Day tomorrow. I hope it's a wonderful occasion for you. I just met a brand new mother, your Vice President, Marcia, and her newborn, Sophia Grace. And, you know, newborns, they're just amazing. It reminds me so much of the miracle that we have called life. And I don't just mean human life, I mean all life throughout the cosmos. They're, you know, the great classical physicists, the ones who were the pioneers in quantum physics, they started out as great materialists, and they saw the universe as a wonderful machine. And then they started looking as deeply as one could into the nature of nature. And toward the end of their careers, we're talking Einstein and Max Planck and David Bohm, Niels Bohr, all those guys, you know, they started talking more like mystics than materialists, because they look so deeply into the miracle that is creation. And they said, whoa, you know, there's just some kind of vast intelligence at work here that doesn't really fit into a test tube. We don't know what it is or what to call it, but it's plain as day. That speaks volumes. So it's nice to be back here in Evanston. I was here last in 2004. IANDS held a meeting then, and I remember enjoying that visit very much, and it's great to be back. Happy 21st anniversary. Diane, thank you for this opportunity to speak today, and thank you for the yeoman's job you have done in organizing one of the best community chapters IANDS can boast of throughout the world. You are a beautiful soul, and getting to know you really for the first time. I've had many encounters with Diane over the years, but you know, when you come and you spend some quality time, you get to know a person, and she's the real deal, and she's doing work in service to the greater good, and Chicago IANDS is honored to have her leadership, and I wish her 21 more good years, and even more. So thank you for all you've done and will do. The great state of Illinois is the first corporate home of IANDS. I was privileged to operate the organization from my home in Peoria, and then later here in Chicago over by Wrigley Field, near Halstead and Addison, when I moved out of Peoria and came to Chicago. You know, it was an interesting time, and so Illinois looms large in the history of the organization. This is really where it came to life. The first issues of vital signs, the first issues of well, I called it Antibiosis back then, but it was actually, I think now it's called the Journal of Near-Death Studies. So this date figures prominently into the history. So I want to start by quoting Ram Dass. Now, you know, Ram Dass has said many profound things, okay, but one of the things he said that always stayed in my mind, it's indelibly etched, is he was asked once, he said, do you ever get nervous speaking before people? And he said, no, I don't. I just remind myself that there's only one of us here. Isn't that beautiful? And that also speaks volumes. Truly, there is only one of us here. Because we all come from the same source, we all return to the same source. There's no disputing that. JFK, in his famous speech at American University, was trying to promote unity, global nuclear disarmament, and he said, come on, you know, we're all human, we're all mortal. I disagree with that part. The body is, but not the other parts. But he said, you know, we all breathe the same air, we all have the same hopes for our children. So we've got to find a way to live together in peace. And I think he said, I think that speech was in 1963. It was a beautiful speech. George Harrison, the late George Harrison, ex-Beatle, former Beatle, wrote the song Within You, Without You on Sgt. Pepper's. And George was great. He's terrific, very spiritual, as you might know. And he said, you know, when you see beyond yourself, you will find peace of mind is waiting there. And the time will come when you'll see we're all one, and life flows on within you and without you. So, God bless George. And I also want to quote John Lennon, who said, I think it was, there may not be much difference. It was a song off his Somewhere in New York City album. He said, there may not be much difference between Richard Nixon and Chairman Mao if you listen to their heartbeat or their breath, or if you were to examine their skeletons. And he also said, last night the wife said, oh boy, when you're dead, you don't take nothing with you but your soul. Great wisdom. So as you know from past meetings, Diane has this format where I speak first for about 45 minutes, and then there's going to be about a half-hour break, and then I come back and speak for another 90 minutes. So the first 45 minutes, I'm going to give you some historical tidbits that I promise you will be entertaining and enthralling, stories you've never heard before, and probably will find interesting. And they fit in to what I need to say in part two. And the second part of my presentation, that is entitled The Future Beckons. What will we make of it? It's all about the future for me. It's really not about life after death or consciousness or spirituality or anything. To me, it's about what can we do now to assure a positive future for Earth and all its inhabitants. That's my focus. It's always been my focus throughout the 45 years I've been doing this work, since age 22 in 1974. So, in looking around at all of you, I want to say I'm compelled to say that it's nice to see the circle come to life. And I know you don't know what that means yet, so I just want to say that community chapters began in my mind as a circle, a small circle in a big org chart. I first presented the idea in November of 1977 in a meeting we had in Charlottesville, Virginia. And you know, I knew what community chapters could be and should be, and it's nice to see that concept coming alive here in Chicago. I encourage you to support this organization as much as you can for all the good it can do and has done. But I actually conceived IANDS much earlier, in April of 1974. It came as a download, whole to part and part to whole. But it took me 3 years to convince our dear friend, Dr. Raymond Moody, to allow me to proceed with the development of the idea. So the story of how I met Raymond, which I met him long before, at least a year or so before he published Life After Life. And I must say that it was the ring of destiny, and I don't think ever before have I had, or since, quite the reaction that I had when I first learned about him and the work he was doing. So if you'll indulge me, I do need to share this story. It's really quite fascinating. I still marvel at it because it reminds us of how miraculous everything is. Now, I don't believe that every single thing is scripted, but I think the major events are scripted, and I believe that, you know, I came in to do this work as much as Raymond and Dr. Kubler-Ross and others, and it became clear to me when I look back on it to see all of the coincidences and so-called coincidences and synchronicities that took place that allowed this to happen in the first place. So for me, it goes back to age 8, in 1960, it seemed like yesterday, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, 3rd grade. My buddy, Mike Waters, his mom, who was a dear friend, his house was on the way home for me, and I'd always stop there after school often for the proverbial, milk and cookies, and we would play. Well, his mom had a sudden heart attack and had been rushed by ambulance to Broward General Hospital. And she, well, by all reports, she died. And then she was resuscitated at some point later at the hospital. And I knew her before the heart attack. And I knew her after. And I can tell you that she was a different person. But on this one day, when she'd come back from the hospital, this week or so before, Mike seemed really kind of sad and bummed out, and we're walking home. I said, "What's the matter?" And he said, "It's my mom." I said, "Well, I thought she was fine." He said, "Well, yeah, she is, but I want my old mom back. I don't like the new mom." And I said, "Really? How has she changed? What happened?" "Well, all she does is talk about God and heaven and the angels and how much God loves us and how great it all is. My mom was never religious. Now all of a sudden, she's a Jesus freak." Okay? I said, "Well, I got to see this." So this is my first encounter with her after after her discharge from the hospital, and she was definitely different. She had a glow about her. I don't see auras, but I sometimes sense them. And her aura was like off the charts. And she was all smiles, effervescent, I guess is the word. So I said, "Miss Waters, are you okay?" And she goes, "Oh yes, honey, I'm fine. So I'm sure glad you're out of the hospital. You gave us all a big scare." And she said, "Oh, I know, honey, I'm so sorry, but I'm happy to be home, and I just feel better than I've ever felt in my entire life." Now I can remember this experience, this encounter with her, like it was yesterday, because it imprinted on my mind as something that was really important, and I needed to pay attention. But I was going to pay attention anyway, because I was really struck by the change in this woman. I guess this is what they call being born again, because she was definitely born in a person. I said, "Well, Mike tells me you died and went to heaven." "I sure did." "Well, what was heaven like?" This is my first interview with a near-death experience. So I beat everybody to it, but I just never published a case, so what can I say? But I missed out on that. But anyway, who knew? I didn't know anything about near-death experiences. The term hadn't even been invented yet. But here she was telling me about heaven and the angels and God and how beautiful it all was. So then I went outside and played, forgot about it, and it kind of stayed dormant in my mind. So now I have to go forward to the year 1968. I'm now in between my sophomore and junior year at Fort Lauderdale High School. And I guess I'm 17 maybe, somewhere in there. And my good friend, Dominic Madonna, who was the older brother of my closest friend at the time, Jimmy Madonna, he had been drafted and sent to Vietnam in infantry, U.S. Army. Now Dominic was like a big brother to me. Great guy. Looked a lot like Frankie Avalon. Taught us how to fish, let us drive his car, 57 Chevy. He quickly became my best friend. Even I liked him more than Jimmy. So when Dominic went to Vietnam, he did so because it was his duty, and that's how the family was. You know, you don't burn your draft card, you don't burn the flag, your country, right or wrong, your country. So he went into the Army, basic at Fort Jackson, advanced training infantry at Fort Benning, and then was sent to Da Nang. And in August of '68, he was killed in a mortar attack in Da Nang. First time I'd ever experienced the death of someone I really loved and was close to. It just walloped me, brought me down to my knees, depressed for a long time about it. So I made up my mind then and there that I was going to enlist in the Army because at the time I believed my government. I didn't think my government capable of lying or misrepresenting. I just said, well, I'm totally behind the red, white, and blue, and if they say this war is a just cause, it's a just cause. So I'm going to enlist for infantry, and I want to go to the same company, and I want to be sent to Da Nang, and I want to avenge Dominic's death, and I want to help those poor, oppressed people in Vietnam. So I did. And I went into the recruiter after I graduated and turned 18. I went in and said, sign me up, infantry, Vietnam, that's what I want. He said, okay, hero. He said, you got to take some aptitude tests first. So I did. He said, we can't give you infantry. I said, I'm not smart enough for infantry? He said, no, you're too smart. He said, you got to go into computers, high-speed, encrypted computer communications that are via computers. Like, what's a computer? Don't worry about that. The Army will teach you all that. I don't really think I have the intelligence for that. He said, well, you do, and we really need you here. So if you want to serve your country, this is what you'll do. Well, no, I want to go to Vietnam. Well, that's fine. You know, you'll probably go to Saigon, a major communications center there. Okay, fine, all right, we'll do it. Now, all this, by the way, is leading up to how I met Raymond and all the kinds of things that had to happen for that meeting to take place. But before I go further in the story, Diane, I need to ask you a program question. 45 minutes is like in 10 minutes. We started late, so what time do you want me to stop this first part?
3.
Soon?
At 3 o'clock.
At 3 o'clock, okay. Got a lot to say, and I'm trying to keep myself from digressing so we can get across all the major points here. So I went to Fort Gordon, Georgia, and Augusta, Georgia for my advanced training in encrypted high-speed digital communication, and I learned about IBM mainframes and all that. I finished top of the class miraculously, I don't know how. And the section chief comes over and says, hey, guess what? You're staying here to teach. No. Half the class is going to Germany, half the class is going to Vietnam. I didn't know which half I was, so I'm going to Vietnam. He said, no, you're not going to Vietnam. You'd be going to Germany, and then in a year you'll go to Vietnam. But you'll go to Vietnam after you finish your first year of teaching here. Nobody's ever turned it down. You know, you'd be the first, so you really should do this. So I did. Because you really don't say no in the Army, you know, they're persuasive. So, I don't know, somewhere in the course of that teaching, I was instructor of the month, and I got an award, and the commandant of the signal school said, hey, you know, come to work in my office, protocol, we've got an opening, we'll promote you to sergeant, and you won't teach anymore. I said, you don't say no to the commandant. So I said, sure, okay. So I did. And in the course of that relationship, he convinced me that I needed to go to college and become an officer so he could groom me to become a general officer. He thought I was perfect for that because I was so gung-ho and, you know, so behind the war. And I said, you know, refreshing to meet a young man who's so patriotic. So anyway, I told him I was not college material. And I really wasn't. I mean, I barely got through high school. Right? So they didn't speak to my listening in high school. Neither did the Catholic Church in my upbringing. But anyway, so he ordered me to go to the guidance center to take what was called the CLEP test. So I did. And the captain of the guidance counselor, the guidance center said to me, congratulations, you finished damn near 2 years of college. Augusta College is going to give you credit for, you're almost going to be in your junior year. What? You know, what? So, yeah, no problem, it's all set up for you. So I started college at Augusta College. This is how all this happened. I mean, I'm just kind of going with the flow at this point, because I still don't think I can do college level work, regardless of what the test said. So I had this whole image of college being way beyond my ability. But anyway, I was going to transfer to University of Florida when I was discharged. This would have been the first quarter of 1974. But the University of Florida wasn't going to accept a lot of my credit. So I stayed right there at Augusta College. And I got elected president of the sociology club. And we were supposed to bring interesting speakers to campus. So first club meeting in January '74, I said, I think there were 6 people in the club. And I said, does anybody know anybody who would make an interesting speaker? Because there was no money for this, you see, no budget. We just had to rely on admission from ticket sales or donations or whatever at the door. Only one person raised her hand. It was Kathy Tabakian. And she goes, I know somebody, my neighbor, Dr. Raymond Moody. Now, he was a medical student at Medical College of Georgia, because he has a PhD in philosophy from the University of Virginia. I said, what's he going to talk about? Plato and Socrates? You know, and she said, no, he's doing this fascinating research. I'm helping him with it concerning people who have been resuscitated and what they experience while they're unconscious. Whoa. And that's when I got this, you know, head to toe goosebump kind of thing. I got to meet this guy. I got to meet him. How soon can I meet him? Well, I'll call him, you know, tonight, and then maybe, you know, we'll set it up. So I think it was the next day or the day after. I'm over at Raymond's house. So this is January of '74. I wasted no time getting over there, because I'm like, I got to know what this is all about. The memory from 3rd grade came rushing up. You know, I hadn't thought about it since 3rd grade, but the pump had been primed, you see. This is how it all works, the synchronicity stuff. Now, you know, the birth of Sophia Grace on May 9 is a miracle. All births are a miracle. All life is a miracle. I watched this PBS documentary on the miracle of birth, and I learned so much about what's involved, how intricate it all is. The designer is amazing, magnificent. So Einstein says, hey, you know, either everything is a miracle or nothing is. So all this happening in my life is no less miraculous. So I just want you to remember, if you take nothing else away from today, take away the insight, and you probably already know this because I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but the insight that everything is a miracle. Everything. The fact that we can have this conversation, that I can express these thoughts, that we're in these contraptions called a body, and that one day we won't be, but we'll be on to something else even better. It's all amazing. And it's not the result of chaos theory or accident or happenstance. It's by design. And the engineer is indescribable. That's what the near-death experiencers say. They don't have the words for it. But anyway, I met Raymond. We fell in love at first sight. No threat to his wife, Louise. They were high school sweethearts, strictly platonic. But we were clearly joined at the hip from that point forward. I helped him with the research. And we remained very close throughout the years, through all of his ups and downs. And I love Raymond dearly, and he's a great blessing on the planet. So I invited him to speak. And I think it was one of his first, if not the first, lecture on the subject, public lecture. And we packed the auditorium. I think it was 2,500, 3,000 seats, something like that. And there was a panel discussion following it. Now this is before the book comes out, just before. Well, actually, the book came out like a year later. So he was still in the process of the research on the 150 cases that Life After Life speaks about. And so he spoke eloquently. Raymond's a great speaker, very entertaining, great storyteller. And I'm sitting there listening, and I'm very proud of what we've done. This is our coming out party as president of the Sociology Club. And I filled the auditorium, and it was great. It was all about, is there life after death? And that was the posting all around the campus. Science speaks to the question, I think was the subtitle. Anyway, during that talk, I got another great moment of goosebumps. And I call it a download. I don't know what else to call it. I am not a channel. I'm not a psychic. I'm not a medium. I don't hear voices or anything like that. But I get these, I don't know, I call them thought implants. I don't know what else to call them. And it was, you got it. This stuff is powerful. This stuff has enormous potential to change the world. I didn't like the world then. I like it even less now. Because we're still making very stupid choices as a species that are bringing us into great peril. So I've always been sensitive all my life to suffering. And I've always asked myself, what can we do to make it better here? How can we get to the next level? There's got to be a next level. I know we're capable of greater than what we have around us. There doesn't need to be hunger. There doesn't need to be poverty. There doesn't need to be illiteracy. There doesn't need to be war. How do we get from this suboptimal state of affairs to a better way? That's the question I've always asked myself. And I knew it wasn't religion. When I met Raymond, I was agnostic. I had tried different religions. None of them rang my bell. And I didn't think any of them were really, truly representing this magnificence. I wasn't sure about whether there was a creator or whether there was life after death or any of that. So I was agnostic, but when I met these folks through Raymond, not just the near-death experiencers, but other people doing work in this field, including Elisabeth Kubler-Ross, my perceptions quickly changed, but because of the evidence and data, not because I needed to believe. So I said to Raymond, holy Jesus, this is powerful stuff. I shared with him the download. We've got to create this association for researchers and experiencers, and the interested public, the spiritual seekers. This stuff is going to be big. This is going to be bigger than the Catholic Church. You know? I said, this is amazingly powerful. We can change human nature with this information. We can change the nature of social, political, and economic systems. Raymond says, go play, John. Go play over there in the sandbox. He's like, you're the most idealistic guy I know. You're the most pure spirit. I love you for your innocence, but I'm really not into organizations, and I don't. It's not my thing. So, and I'll talk more about this later. But Raymond was like, for the first 3 years of this idea, the long gestation period, he was like completely thumbs down on it. And I understood. He was very, very busy. I mean, he was, when Life After Life was published in '75, with the Foreword by Elisabeth, he became much in demand, as you might imagine. And his life changed dramatically. Now, he and Elisabeth spoke on the phone many times prior to the publication of Life After Life, but they never physically met. So when she came to speak at Kennesaw Community College near Atlanta, we were in Augusta, not too far away, and Raymond doesn't drive, and he doesn't have a head for practical things at all. That's not his talent. So I said, hey, would you like to meet Elisabeth in person, because she's going to be here? And he said, I'd love to. I said, well, I'll drive you. Because I'm like, okay, maybe she'll like the idea. And maybe she could convince Raymond. Because I'm like a heat-seeking missile, I'm a Taurus, right? And with an Aries rising, when I get my mind made up, it's like, I part the seas. At least I think I can. So anyway, Raymond said, sure, let's do it. So we did, and I was there to introduce the two. I thought it was, an awesome, auspicious occasion. Two great agents of social change, both of whom were doing work in this embryonic field of near-death research. Elisabeth was starting to talk about it in her work. And they said, we should go and have a little chit-chat, and they did, and I'm trying to bring up the idea of this association, but I could never get it in. But I did hear them talk a lot about, they were comparing notes, what they had learned, and they were pretty much in agreement that the data comported from their respective studies. So I really felt there was enormous potential there that could advance the goal of higher civilization. And I thought these two were the folks who could do it, because they were both charismatic in their own way. Elisabeth more so. I mean, when she spoke, you could hear a pin drop, if any of you knew her. So in 1975, I graduated to get my bachelor's, and I moved to Blacksburg, Virginia to pursue a master's in sociology. Raymond coincidentally moved to Virginia as well the next year to pursue his residency in psychiatry. And so it was about an hour and a half, 2 hours apart. Life After Life had become a global bestseller. It was getting mail from all over the world. There were researchers contacting him, experiencers, spiritual seekers, members of the clergy, all seeking help or guidance. He was getting some letters saying that he was in league with the devil and he was going to burn in hell too. I mean, it was a very interesting time because some folks felt that this was all the work of the devil. But anyway, I said, look, Raymond, look at all this. Now, do you agree that there needs to be this association? And he was still not really fond of the idea. But then in the fall of 1976, something very important happened. A man came to see Raymond. I was invited to the meeting. So was he, and Dr. Ewan Stevenson, who at the time was head of the Division of Perceptual Studies at UVA. I think Bruce Greyson was there, Monroe from Monroe Institute, Attorneys Out of the Body. And I came as Raymond's guest as well, as it was at his home. And the man was Jim McDonnell, of McDonnell Douglas Aircraft. Now I'm telling this story for the first time publicly. I don't think it's ever been told anywhere by anyone, so consider yourselves privileged. This is quite a story. Mr. McDonnell was a very wealthy man. McDonnell Douglas doesn't exist anymore. It was acquired by Boeing. I don't know if they acquired Boeing or Boeing acquired them. I'm not quite sure, but anyway, it's part of Boeing. And he made a fortune from the aircraft industry. And he was a very, larger-than-life kind of guy. And he kind of, he didn't walk into the room. He entered the room, and he called this meeting, and he's waving around Life After Life, and he said, "You know what you've got here? You've got a weapon more powerful than any on the face of the planet." He said, "Do you understand the importance of what you've done?" Yes, yes. Thank you, God. Thank you, God. He said, Raymond, he said, that conference that he came to at UVA, it was about the future of the Soviet Union. And there was great concern at the time that nuclear war between the two great superpowers would be inevitable. And, to his credit, he didn't want to see that. Nobody does. JFK saw the potential for that, which is why he gave that speech at American University. He stared into the nuclear abyss during the Cuban Missile Crisis, as you all know. So anyway, he was there, and he said, for that purpose, and he said, "Look, I have my checkbook here in my pocket." He pulls it out. "I am prepared to write you a sizable check, you name the amount, to pursue research in this very important field of inquiry, if you will promise me scientific evidence of life after death. Because if you can, it will create ideological havoc in the Soviet Union. and it will bring communism to a screeching halt, and it will eliminate the Red Menace. Now, I know at this point in my maturation, I no longer believe in the Red Menace. You know, it's good for justifying big defense budgets and all that, but you know, I had very different feelings about Vietnam halfway into service. I was protesting the war halfway into service out of uniform. Because I read the Pentagon Papers, and I talked to guys who'd been there and heard their stories directly. So I had a different attitude about it. But anyway, I knew where he was going with this, because he was correct that this information is powerful. Concepts are powerful, words are powerful, they give rise to reality. They give rise to religions, they give rise to nation states, to inventions. It all begins in the mind. And so he said, I will make this gift to you. You start a 501c3 because I want the tax write-off, but you pull the team together, but you know, I will make it happen. Now Raymond, of course, is a PhD in philosophy, and I'm thinking, man from heaven, finally my prayers are answered, we can start the association. He sees that this can change human nature. He sees that this can change the nature of political, social, and economic systems. Really thought the ship had come in. And then Raymond rained on my parade. he said, oh, Mr. McDonald, that is so nice of you. I'm very flattered. But honestly, science can never, ever provide evidence of life after death. That's just an impossibility. Even the statement itself, life after death, is a nonsense statement. I'm very well trained in the requirements of proof, and we can't give it to you. Certainly not enough to bring about ideological chaos in the Soviet Union. End of conversation, end of meeting. Mr. McDonald left the room with his checkbook. I was crestfallen, to say the least. But the good thing that happened was, because of Jim's observation about the power, and because he felt the need to harvest and harness this power for that purpose, and because of all the mail that Raymond had been flooded with, he finally realized, yeah, you know, maybe there is a need for this association. So in the fall of '76, he said, okay, John, you can contact the researchers that have written me, and you can use my name, and we'll see how this flies with them. So that's when I reached out to Mike Sabom and Ken Ring, Bruce Greyson, Dr. Kubler-Ross, others. And we all agreed that we would have this, they all kind of liked I met with them all personally about it, and they all liked the idea. So we had our first organizational meeting in November of '77 at the Holiday Inn in Charlottesville. And that's where you guys were a little circle on the chalkboard. And now here you are. See, all begins in the head, a little circle on a chalkboard, and voila, a manifestation. So everyone in that meeting said, yeah, that's a great idea, let's do it. Now, I was not allowed to put everything up on the board that I was thinking, because there were too many circles. They were like, okay, no, keep it contained to a few things, like research and support groups for the people who are coming forward with having experiences. So anyway, I finished my master's in '77, and I moved to Peoria to work at the Illinois Central Health Systems Agency. And then in spring '78, Bruce and Mike and Ken were attending a parapsychology conference at Washington University in St. Louis, not too far away. So we decided to have our first board meeting there. That's where we drafted the bylaws and the articles of incorporation, and soon after we incorporated. So I ran IANDS from my home in Peoria and later Chicago, '78 through '82. I did the first prospective study of NDEs at St. Francis Hospital and Methodist Medical Center in Peoria. 250 cases, we got 57, so I never published the data because I couldn't justify doing the data analysis with such a small sample. And I also formed Hospice of Central Illinois at that time. And in May of '82, I moved back to South Florida to direct hospice in Palm Beach County, and Ken Ring took over the running of IANDS at that point. So I think we're at 3 o'clock, and I'm going to stop my comments there. And we'll take a little break, and then we'll come back for part 2. Well, just a few more thoughts about the part 1. Recently, I spoke on the phone with Jane DeForest, who was your speaker last month, and it was our first meeting arranged to Diane, and she said, "Oh, I'm so honored to talk with you." She said, "Thank you for saving my life. IANDS saved my life, and you created IANDS, so I really need to say thank you." She was really profuse in her gratitude, and I said, "Well, Jane, you're kind." I said, "But I can't take credit for whatever contributions IANDS made to your well-being." She said, "Well, why not?" I said, "Well, because I ran it, I conceived it, and I ran it until 1982, but what IANDS has done since, what it's become, I had no involvement with." So there were many, many others who worked very hard to build IANDS over the years, and so a host of people who deserve the credit, not me, and that's not false modesty. So she said, "Well, you know, you conceived it, you ran it, you deserve some of the credit." And I said, "Well, I'm telling you now, and I'm telling her, and I'm telling you now that I give all the credit to the others, because I really took my leave from IANDS in 1985 because I had this big macro vision of what it needed to be and should be, and all the others, including the researchers, had a very different view of it. So I kind of moved on to other things, and I love IANDS. I wish them well. I hope they flourish and achieve great success over the years to come. And I'm proud of what good they've done, but I honestly take no credit for what they've done heretofore and going forward into the future. So, in the words of Chicago's own, the late Paul Harvey, now you know the rest of the story. And the question is, did I choose, now that you know how I got into all of this, did I choose this work, or did this work choose me? So maybe it's a little bit of both, but this is all part of the unfolding miracle that I hope we all can wake up to, because there are signs, abundance of signs all around us every day, to clear evidence that everything is a miracle. Okay, part 2, the future beckons. Now this is all about the future. For me, it's not about life after death or consciousness or spirituality. It's about what can we do while we have time and opportunity to assure an optimal future for Earth and all its inhabitants. The late Barbara Marx Hubbard once said, or often said really, humanity must evolve or perish. So I have a question for you, show of hands. How many of you honestly feel that humanity is evolving sufficiently to create the ideal of an optimal future for Earth and all its inhabitants? Just show of hands, how many feel that they're evolving sufficiently? Okay, one person. You're a great optimist, always the eternal optimist. That's wonderful. Glass is half full. Then it is. Okay, how many of you feel, well, that the opposite of true, that we're running out of time and that we may soon self-destruct? Okay. How many don't know? Fair enough, fair enough. Okay, Que Sera, Sera, you know that lovely song, The Future's Not Ours to See. I love the song, love it when Doris Day sang it back in the 50s, but you know, I have to disagree with the lyric, because the future is ours to see. It is ours to co-create. Abe Lincoln said it beautifully all those years ago. He said, the best way to predict the future is to create it. And I couldn't agree more. The future exists as a set of probabilities and possibilities. And what kind of future we will realize is going to be a matter of our collective choice. And collective choice is the sum total of all the individual choices that we make each and every day. How do we make better choices? What will we make of the future? Will we make it a heaven? Or will we make it a hell? Will we make it something sacred and magnificent, or something profane and nightmarish? The choice is ours. Chief Seattle said, we do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children. When I saw that newborn today, I said, I didn't know whether to feel joy or sorrow. You know, what kind of world are we giving to this little girl? I have my concerns, and that's why I do this work. That's why I have dedicated myself to this, because I think we're on the precipice of a major turning point where we're either going to get a big sledgehammer or we're going to turn the other direction and head toward a future that we can all be proud of. Einstein is quoted in the Attorney brochure as, which I think most of you got a copy of, as he said this in, I think 1952 or 3, that's the Attorney brochure. He said, we shall require a substantially new manner of thinking if humanity is to survive. He said, this thing about duality, the separateness, is a kind of optical delusion of consciousness, because everything is one at the quantum level, at the unmanifest. Hence, all is one at the manifest. And to think that we're all separate and apart is illusory. Now remember, he took part in the Manhattan Project. He helped invent the atom bomb, the advent of the nuclear age. And he had great misgivings about that. And now look what we have. Over 17 million nuclear weapons on the planet. Could destroy it many times over. It's madness, it's moronic. But here we have it. So Einstein also said, geez, I don't know what World War III will be fought with, but I know that World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones. So that's where we're going if we don't change our ways. Jane Goodall and I met, you know, Jane, the chimpanzee lady. What a wonderful lady. What a force of nature. We both wrote chapters in Irvin Laszlo's latest book called The Intelligence of the Cosmos. And I met her through all of that, and we personally met for the first time in March of this year. And she moved me to tears, choked me up, and very few people can do that anymore. I don't know that anyone can really, but she did. And she gave a very poignant talk, 2 rousing standing ovations. And she talked about the spirit, the divine spirit that runs through all things. She learned this from her solitude in the jungle in Tanzania, Gombe, where she spent, I don't know, years studying primates, their behavior, mostly chimps. And now, of course, she runs the Jane Goodall Institute, and she travels all over the world 10 months out of the year, giving talks about how important it is to, well, to turn a new leaf, to wake up to this spiritual thread that is through all life. Because she is interested primarily in helping the chimps and the primates and their preserving their habitats. But she told me, she said, you know, what good is that? Well, if the earth is in peril, if humanity continues to make poor choices? What good is all the work that I'm doing if the planet itself is in the process of great peril? So Jane said, she talks all over the world, and she said there's growing pessimism among the youth. There's this Roots and Shoots program aimed at young people, and she said, that they're discouraged about the kind of world they're inheriting. And she said, I don't think we have much time left. She said, I think there's a narrow window of opportunity to still turn things around. So I am not one who is an alarmist. And I don't want to say repent, because the kingdom of God is at hand. I feel like John the Baptist. But, the evidence is pretty overwhelming that we better act with great urgency to reverse direction, chart a new course toward a better future. Don't take my word for it. Nature magazine, current issue, just released the biodiversity report that was undertaken by the United Nations. Over 140 top scientists have unfortunately announced that of the 8 million species on planet Earth, over 1 million are now at extinction or in danger of near extinction, or total extinction in the near future. The cause? 8 billion people on the planet, putting enormous pressure on the planet and its ecosystems. Mostly making poor choices in relation to their behavior toward one another and in relation to their behavior toward the planet. So we are the cause. We have met the enemy, and it is us. And the question really before us is not, is there life after death, but what does it mean that there is life after death? What does it mean? How do we stop people from making poor and reckless choices? What's the root cause of all that? I've spent 45 years thinking about all this, trying to find that answer. And in my mind, the root cause is flawed perceptions of reality. We don't know who we are or why we're here, most of us. In the ultimate sense. We misperceive reality, so we have flawed values, or no values at all that are conducive to a sustainable, ideal future. With all due respect to Dr. Steven Pinker from Harvard, who wrote the book Enlightenment Now, talking about how great things are, the planet is in great distress. And it's the only home we have. And if we don't get it together as a species, the future may become quite dystopian. So our planet is troubled. It's getting more so every day. Darkness is on the face of the land. A spiritual eclipse overtakes humankind. We're morally bankrupt for the most part. We're very short-term in our thinking. We have the attention span of a gnat, most of us. Ego and greed dominate the planet, and the materialistic model that science still continues to advocate is suffocating us. So what's the solution? How do we assure the co-creation of an ideal future? Well, the short answer is we must own what we know now. And we must act quickly and decisively on what we know without further delay. There's no more time to waste. And if I'm an alarmist, I am so unapologetically. Because I have a sense of urgency about it, and I agree with Jane Goodall and the team of scientists commissioned by the United Nations that we're past the 11th hour, past many critical tipping points. So this is a call for all hands on deck. It's a call for a full court press. So what do we know for sure that we can act upon for sure with confidence? You know, there's this great quote by Mark Twain. I love Mark Twain. He says, you know, it's not what we don't know that will get us in trouble. It's what we think we know for sure that just ain't so. So, admitting that as a danger, I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to read you. Jane Goodall, by the way, is a wonderful poet. I highly recommend her book, Reason for Hope, tearjerker, and also very inspiring. But she's a great poet. She wrote this poem called Reductio ad absurdum. And this is about truth, the pursuit of truth. What is truth? And it was inspired after reading the philosophy of Hume, the philosophers in the audience. And I'm not a poet much, so if I get the rhyme scheme wrong, forgive me, but she says, now if you take an orange and hold it in your hand, it isn't really there at all, or so I understand. A sensationalist will prove to you that though you know it's there, it's only just sensations of which you are aware. Seeing, feeling, tasting, smelling, sensations he will call, and all these things exist in you, not the fruit at all. Now eat it, he may say to you, sensation once again. Though he says it isn't there, to eat it would seem in vain. Well, the British would say again. It would rhyme with vain. So, okay, but still you feel he must be wrong, and so you will persist. You tell him plainly you're quite sure that matter does exist. It can't be seen or touched or heard, so it can't be known. So why assume it's there at all, when truth can never be shown? Thus he'll reply, and after that, maybe he'll declare that you are only his sensation, and so you can't be there. But I'm as real as you cry. To this he must agree, and so he maintains that he himself is unreality. It follows thus that everything which you would say exists is non-existent and unreal to the sensationalists. And therefore I will cease to write, since I cannot be here, and none can ever read these lines, for nobody is there. All right, so this brings a very critical point to the conversation. And it's a pet peeve of mine. We play very highly sophisticated mind games with ourselves, word games. Well, what's the definition of death? What's the definition of near? What's the definition of consciousness? What constitutes incontrovertible, irrefutable evidence? The scientific study of anecdotal data is pseudoscience. You know, really? Okay, so the cynicism and skepticism today, because of these games we play, is at an all-time high. We don't know what to believe in. We don't know what to trust. So we're rudderless in the water. Is any wonder we're morally bankrupt? The churches don't speak to us. Synagogues, temples, ashrams, mosques. And if they were doing a better job of it, would we have the state of affairs on the planet that we have today? So it's you know, and science isn't speaking to us on these subjects. So we're out here, the lone voices in the wilderness, saying, hey, pay attention to this. This is powerful stuff. There's plenty of evidence if you really want to look at it. So let me share with you what I believe is true, objectively speaking, for what it's worth. I'm not a scientist. I make no claim to be. But I approach things with the discipline of the scientist. I am not interested in dogma. I'm not interested in opinion, fantasy, or fiction. I'm only interested in truth. Not lies, not half-truths, truth. And if I can only find one true thing, I'll hang my hat on it. Well, I found 7 true things after 45 years of doing this work. And it's a convergence model, and I think you all have a copy of it. Just I passed it out. It's called the 7 Statements. I hope you've had time to read it, because the next part of this conversation concerns this document. If you haven't read it yet, please do. So, after 45 years of this work, I feel confident that we have arrived at some basic fundamental truths that can serve as a reliable bedrock for the reconstruction of society, for the realization of higher civilization, and the co-creation of an optimal future. I have an advantage because I've interviewed hundreds of people who've had STEs over the last 45 years. I've directed 2 hospices that have put me at the bedside of people who are dying as they transition. So I've seen a lot of remarkable things. And I'm very familiar with the data, even the historical data that goes back to Plato. And it all adds up to one great conclusion for me, this convergence model that is the 7 Statements. And that document is the key to a sustainable future. I'll explain that in a moment. If everybody could have the prep work that I had, there'd be no more debate about this. We'd be well on our way toward higher civilization. You know, beyond that, I've also had some direct personal experience. No, I've not been out of my body. I've not had an NDE. I haven't been regressed into a past life, and I don't need to be, really. I get it, you know. But I have had angel encounters that saved my life unmistakably, miraculously, and I have had some after-death contact, communication. In Bill Guggenheim's book, Hello from Heaven, copy of it out there on the table. I recommend it if you haven't read it. Plenty of data in there that talks all about how the other side reaches out to us. And one example of an after-death contact I had concerns the pet cat that my wife and I, my daughter, had named Marbles. Now, I wasn't going to tell the story, but I told Diana, she said, you've got to tell the story, so I'm working it in, and I'm needing extra time in my talk to finish this, but I'm going to work in the story. And it's all about this little black rock that's in the shape of a heart, and it's marble, it's black marble, according to a gemologist friend of mine that I shared it with. So this cat, Marbles, was the runt of the litter. We took him in as a kitten, and black cat with the green eyes, and 23 years. Sweet cat, never hissed, only purred, never clawed at anything, never killed anything, wasn't in any domination games with the other cats. Just mellow, peace and love. So, our daughter, when she was younger, would dress him up in clothes and wheel him around in the Barbie stroller. And he let her. He's that kind of cat. Cool cat. And we knew he was dying because it was really old for a cat, 23 years. But he didn't want the needle. He didn't want to be euthanized. We could sense that. So he stayed with us to the very end. So my wife loves cats. We're animal lovers and nature lovers. And, we're like part of the family, right? So we're all one. It doesn't matter what the form is. It's that divine spirit that runs through everything, as Jane Goodall said. So I took Marbles out to the cat graveyard in the backyard, and I buried him next to his brother and sister. We also took from the litter. And I dug the standard cat grave, 2 feet wide by 3 feet deep, and at the bottom I found this stone. Well, you know where I'm going with it. So put Marbles down there in the grave, put the stone on top of his body, and backfilled the grave. Raked it, and the process of raking it. The stone was there. Put that on his body. How did he put it back up here? Now, I live in Boca Raton, Florida, near the ocean. It's limestone and coral and beach sand. You don't get black marble there. I could dig up my whole yard and not find a stone. I could dig up my whole block and not find a stone like this. So, I asked the gemologist, I said, is it kind of odd that I would find this in my backyard? He said, yeah. So The cat's name is Marbles, and he was all black, and this is in the shape of a heart. Now, the scientist in me would say, oh, that's a nice story, doesn't prove anything. Coincidence. Really? Either everything is a miracle or nothing is. What is it? To you, what does it say? How many people think this was an after-death communication? Beautiful. How many think it wasn't? How many don't know? Fair enough. All right. What are the odds that I would find this stone in the shape of a heart that I put in the grave? I mean, this to me is like as plain as the nose on my face, and I'm not trying to overreach the data. The data is trying to impress upon me the wonder of it all. I think it was Marvel saying, hey, I'm feeling the love. Thank you guys for a great ride. I'm still connected. This is a big picture we're talking about. You know, don't forget the spirit dances unfolding. We'll meet again. So that's my Marvel story, for what it's worth. So the question is, you know, what is objectively true? And how can we prove it? The 7 statements. Are they true? Well, do they have the ring of truth? Do they resonate with you? I can tell you this. For all I know and all I'm worth, all I've witnessed and seen, all the folks I've spoken with, the MDs, the PhDs, the experiencers, they're as true as I am standing here. But then again, as Jane Goodall pointed out, maybe I'm not standing here. So, you know, who knows? You know, I can tell you that if these statements are true, and if we can take them as true collectively, they would bring about remarkable change in human behavior and in human nature and in the nature of social, political, and economic systems. So I want to ask you all, I was planning to do something, an exercise, but I think in the interest of time I won't. I think we have about an hour left, but I would like to have a bit of a discussion about each of these statements. Has anybody not read the summary? Okay, well, just kind of bear with us then. Let's just go to statement number 1. Basically, it says, consciousness is independent of and unbounded by space, time, and matter, including the brain. It's infinite, non-local, non-material. It is the continuous experience of awareness in the eternal now and the infinite here, as a primal causal factor in the universe. Mass and matter, same terms, are at effect. It reaffirms the ancient wisdom that consciousness has primacy over matter, mind over matter. How many people, show of hands, think the statement is true? How many think it is false? How many don't know? Okay. That's a powerful statement. Energy can't be destroyed, Einstein said. It changes form. That's what we do. We exist as pure consciousness, a pure awareness, but we're not in form. Can't describe that, don't know what it consists of, but it is indestructible, and it is eternal. And truly, Christ said it. If you had the faith of a mustard seed, you could move mountains. He said, "These things I do, you can do and greater. Except that you be like me, you cannot know the kingdom of heaven." So it's all throughout sacred texts in all the major religions. So this statement number 2: consciousness can and does manifest in various forms, times, and places throughout the endless spectrum of eternal existence, as needed for one's ongoing spiritual progression, which ultimately culminates in the achievement of cosmic consciousness, Christ consciousness, enlightenment, whatever you want to call it, Buddha consciousness. defined as a supremely blissful state of union and cohesion with source, creator of all that is. How many think that is a true statement? How many think it's false? Okay. Number 3, all things in the cosmos are inextricably linked, connected, constantly influencing each other non-locally, without regard for space or time, and instantaneously. An electron on one end of the universe can communicate instantly with an electron on the other end of the universe. Physicists have shown this. So it's all interconnected, interdependent, interrelated. We're all integral participants in a unified field of creation, information, energy, and matter. It's one interwoven, interrelated web of creation designed by a vast intelligence. Number 4. Well, let me go back. How many think that's true? Okay. How many think it's false? Okay, so we're all one. We're all one. There's only one of us here. Ram Dass was right. The meaning and purpose of all existence and the ongoing organizing principle of the cosmos, which drives the evolution of all things, is to become a greater expression of unity, harmony, and unconditional love for all things, including oneself, especially oneself. It begins with oneself. How many agree with that? How many disagree? Okay. 5, there's an altruistic, benevolent, supreme intelligence or source underlying all creation and the evolution of the universe, from which all things come and to which all things return. The source is non-judgmental and loves all things unconditionally with ultimate compassion. How many think it's true? How many think it's false? Okay. Now, for those of you who are raising your hand when I say how many think it's false, I'm going to ask you to tell me what would it take to change your mind, because I'm preaching to the choir here. The vast majority believe this is all true. I need to know what it's going to take to convince the people who think this is all heifer dust. I need to know what could possibly change your mind, short of having your own near-death experience. Okay, so number 6. In an interconnected, interdependent, wholly unified universe, there is an intricate matrix of cause-effect relationships, suggesting that what we do to others, we do to ourselves. Laws of karma, action-reaction, cause-effect. We reap what we sow. Sound familiar? And finally, very important, number 7 point. I'm skipping the true-false because I get it. Most of you are on board with it. The optimization of any single aspect of creation serves the optimization of the entire whole of creation, which affirms a synergistic, symbiotic, mutual interdependence between the whole and its constituent elements, such that for creation to be optimized, all of its component parts must be optimized as well, in perfect balance, harmony, unity, and love. Thus, the health and well-being of any part, element, or aspect of the whole influences and impacts the health and well-being of the entire whole. Therefore, optimizing any and all parts optimizes the whole. Likewise, optimizing the whole optimizes the parts. The good of the one serves the good of the many, the good of the many serves the good of the one. Quote Star Trek. Spock. So, there you have it. Now, let me ask you this question. How many of you think, well, if this were commonly true, accepted as true, people acted on it with conviction around the globe, what kind of world would it create? Utopia? The proverbial heaven on earth? Do you think it would be a better world than the one we're now living in?
Yes.
Okay. So, all right. Would we really care if the 7 statements are valid as objective truth, if it can serve the purpose of achieving an ideal future for Earth and all its inhabitants? Would we care if it's true? If it serves this purpose? Does the end justify the means in this case? Show of hands, how many think that that's correct? How many understand what I'm saying? No, okay. What I'm saying is, let's just say this is conceptual and theoretical, we can never prove it, therefore we don't know if it's ever going to be established as objective truth. Does it matter? If we all agreed, you all said a moment ago that you believe that if this were universally accepted as true, whether it is or not, we'd have a much better world than the world we have today. You concur? Are we on that point? Okay. So if that's the case, there's a functional aspect to this, a very practical, rational argument that I'm making. Do I really care if they're true? Well, the scientist in me does, the intellectual does. And by the way, I believe they're true. I don't believe they're true. I know they're true. Okay? I couldn't stand here and give you this talk unless I had that, the courage of my convictions and the confidence that these statements are true for all that I'm worth. But even if they're not, let's just say they're not, but let's say that they do serve that lofty purpose of giving us utopia. Do you care if they're true or false? How many care if they're true or false? You still care. So you'd rather dismiss them as we don't know and continue in the world you're in versus accept them as true and have potentially utopia. Because that's what I'm really asking. I'll ask it again. How many care? Yes?
I think you can say that you want to act as if these are true, but you can at the same time care if they're true or not, right? And there's a part, if you have, if you're intellectually inclined in that way, statements of truth matter to you, but that doesn't mean that because it may not be provable that you don't want to, that you would avoid, living your life in a way as if it was true.
Well, you know that old cliche, I've given up my search for truth and I'm ready to settle for a good fantasy? I'm ready to settle for a good fantasy rather than put up with the madness that we have on planet Earth. I don't want to take questions just yet. I took hers because it seemed to be really compelling, and yours probably too, but we'll get to questions in a moment. Okay, let's go to the hard scientists. The hard sciences, physics, the mother of all sciences, right? Their Bible is the handbook of physical constants. It came out in the 40s, I think. You know how many revisions that book has gone through? The so-called objective truth that's produced by mainstream science keeps changing. Okay, I think it's in its 50th revision. Keeps changing. What is truth? And are we going to play this mind game and head game to the point of oblivion? I'm sorry, but I'm not interested in playing that game anymore. I want an ideal future for Earth and all its inhabitants. That's what I'm all about. I don't want any more of this insanity that I have to witness every day. I don't watch the news anymore. I can't. It's too depressing. It's just too bizarre. But I'm very concerned about the state we're in. And we better wake up and smell the coffee, in my case, which I believe is the 7 statements, because I think that's the key to getting out of the mess we're in. I don't see any other way. We need a spiritual revolution, a spiritual renaissance, a new age of enlightenment, but not one predicated on faith or dogma, one that is firmly rooted in empiricism. We don't have good empiricism surrounding the study of spiritually transformative experiences, but we know an awful lot still. And I don't think no matter how much money we throw at research that these 7 statements are ever going to change. If new data emerges in the future that contradicts any one of these statements, absolutely it will change. Again, we want truth. But if we can never prove truth, even though I'm standing here talking to you, philosophically speaking, can't we just like relax a little bit, get out of these sophisticated head games, and go to, hey, you know, Rome is burning, Notre Dame is burning, and so is the rest of the planet. And we're playing a dangerous game here, roulette, and we may not win that game if we continue on in this manner. So, welcome to Eternia, which I formed in 2012 with Edgar Mitchell, the Apollo 14 astronaut, sixth man to walk on the moon, and with Evan Alexander, a neurosurgeon who wrote Proof of Heaven and other books. And, you know, I left IANDS, I think, 85 or so, because it just wasn't, this is where I always wanted IANDS to be. The 7 program components of Eternia, which you can read about in the brochure. They never really wanted to go there. It was just like too overwhelming as a vision. And that's fine, because what they are doing is great, and they do a lot of good. But I had a bit different agenda in mind, which is why I took my leave in 85. And I started working with Edgar Mitchell, who said, hey, give up that pseudoscience stuff, and come on over here to the real world of science. Let's focus on quantum physics, cosmology, and the quantum hologram. Well, yeah, this quantum hologram is the Akashic record. Well, I don't really give it that title. Ed was trained at MIT, he had a doctorate from MIT, and always the scientist would come out, and he was one very wed to that very high standard of proof, which I'm now describing as a trap. So when, you know, I wasn't planning on forming another organization. I just kind of gave it up because I said, nobody's going to ever understand this, and we're accepted, so I'm just going to move on. And I really got into the whole quantum physics thing and quantum hologram. It was a lot of fun, but nobody understood that either. I was even worse. They glazed over as soon as you mentioned quantum physics. So I'm like, wait, okay. So Evan and I met in 2012, and that's another interesting story. Adam Mitchell, Ed's only biological son, developed testicular cancer, systemic metastatic cancer at age 26. And he died in October 31st, 2010. I counseled Adam and helped him with his transition. And there was a lot of near and death awareness stuff with Adam. It's pretty amazing, which I don't have time for. But Ed went into grief. And about a month after Adam died, a good friend called me and said, hey, John, you know, I'm really concerned about Ed. I think he's in deep depression over Adam's death, and we've got to do something. So I wanted him to have a reading with a friend of mine who's a very gifted medium named Laura Lynn Jackson. I said, okay, great, that's great, Faye. I'll call him up and suggest it. She said, no, I want you to do it. And I said, well, Faye, you know Ed, pick up the phone and call him. And, you know, no, if you suggest it, he'll do it, but he might not do it if I suggest it. I said, no, Ed thinks for himself. He makes up his own mind, so just call him. I can't recommend a medium I don't know. I don't know any good ones. So she said, well, how about if I gift a reading to you too? I said, all right, works for me, but I have no guarantees. Even if I like her, there's no assurance that Ed will agree to accept your gift. So I had the reading with Laura in January 2011. So at the time, she was a high school English teacher in Long Island, mother of 3. And boy, is she ever gifted. I mean, she knocked my socks off. She was incredible, very specific. And we were together on the phone about an hour and a half. She goes, well, John, part 1 is done. But, and I know we're over time, but would you mind hanging on for part 2 because your guys want a word? She said, this part 1 was all about knocking your socks off because you're very analytical and you wouldn't believe part 2 if I didn't get your respect in part 1. So I said, oh, okay, yeah, sure. So she said, look, you were doing something really important and you just walked away from it. You weren't supposed to walk away from it. And she said, but you're going to be given a second chance because it's really important work. And she said, this time you're not supposed to walk away no matter what. She said, it's time for a reboot. She's bringing through the messages from the guides. Okay, she said, you're going to meet a man soon, and this man's going to have a book. It's going to be a bestseller, and all the resources you need will come forward to do this work, and you're supposed to go back to the original vision that you had, that you walked away from. So I said, okay, all right, fair enough. And she made some other predictions too that I won't go into for reasons of time. But Laura was outstanding, just outstanding. So anyway, September 2011, IANDS invited me to Durham for what they call the 30th anniversary. I think I call it the 34th or 5th. But anyway, because they kind of don't recognize the Peoria part. I don't know why, but for some reason they don't kind of count that as part of their operation. Anyway, they invited me to join Bruce and Raymond to speak as one of the founders and talk about the early days. And I accepted, and after we finished, we got a standing ovation, and Eben came up, Eben Alexander, and he said, I really love what you had to say. I'm a neurosurgeon from Harvard. I used to be a materialist, now I'm not. I was in a coma for a week. Please come to my lecture tomorrow. I'll tell you all about my experience. But I want to know all about IANDS and Moody and Kubler-Ross in the early days. And this is the reason I came back to do this work. So can we please meet, maybe for dinner later tonight or something? And I said, sure. So we had this meeting, and I gave him the rest of the story, which I've given you for the most part. And he said, he stood up, and he said, well, he slams the table. It's time for a reboot. I swear to God. I swear to God. What are the odds of that? Okay, now put that story together with my little rock story. The odds are suddenly much bigger even. So you see why I'm now not a believer, but a knower? Never having been out of my body that I know of. But anyway, so he said, you got to get back into this work. And I need your help with this manuscript and getting a publisher. Will you work with me on a reboot? I said, well, I don't think IANDS wanted to go here then, and I don't think they want to go here now, so we'd have to start a whole new thing. He said, no problem. I said, well, I'm not going anywhere with Quantrack, this quantum hologram thing with Ed Mitchell, because nobody understood it, nobody would fund it. So, I said, okay, let's come down to Florida, Lake Worth, where Ed lives. Let's have a meeting, and maybe we can marry the two. Eternia can be the metaphysics, Quantrack can be the physics, together flip sides of the same coin, different avenues, but they're going to go to the same end, which is 7 statements. So he said, yeah, that's great, I'd love to meet him. My father was trying to get into the astronaut corps. I'd love to meet him. So worked out well. They were bosom buddies, so we merged Quantrack and Eternia, and that's when it was launched. Now, Eternia is still unfunded and still non-operational, 7 years of effort, because, and I take full responsibility for this, I have been unable to effectively convince people of its importance and of the merits of its mission and vision, or the importance of its strategies for a better world, for advanced civilization, such that it would inspire and attract major funding. Eternia is not easy. To fully operationalize it requires the budget of a small nation and the army of a small nation. So it's a tall order, I admit it. But what is the objective? Change human nature and change the nature of social, political, and economic systems. This isn't about cleaning up pollution in Lake Michigan. This is about transforming life on planet Earth as we know it, while we still have the opportunity to do it. And as I said earlier, we need a full court press, all hands on deck, because we're running out of time. So I've always envisioned that one day this cause would attract the same level of support, at least, as the major religions. Because isn't it as worthy? If the 7 statements is dogma, I'll tell you what, I got a lot more empirical data in support of that than I have in support of a lot of the dogmas that attract billions of dollars a year in charitable support. So I'm sorry, it must be something I'm doing. And I have to change, and that's my work, because I'm the only one kind of waving the flag with passion and zeal, because I really strongly believe in it. So, you know, this is like reminiscent of my difficulty in convincing Raymond of the importance of IANDS in the early days. It took me over 3 years. And it was Mr. McDonald who finally got the job done in a roundabout way. Well, where is he now? He's on the other side. But I so wish I could find the contemporary version of Jim McDonald, because I could sit down with him and say, hey, I got what you're looking for. And I would have given him the answer I wish Raymond had given him in 1976. So I'm in search of that person with great resources who understands the power and potential of this knowledge, because it is enormous. Somebody who can really connect the dots, kind of like Jim McDonald did back in '76. So if anybody has any ideas, email me. My email is my name, john.audette@eternia, spelled NEA.org. So, you know, folks often don't understand me when it comes to, you know, the mission and vision of Eternia. One person suggested that I reframe the narrative at a 4th grade level of thinking. So I wrote a poem, which Jane likes, called Fred's Big Mistake, One Most Make. It's supposed to be a Dr. Seuss type poem. It's like 30-odd pages. And Fred is a spicebush swallowtail caterpillar. It's a picture which Diane loves. Cute little guy. It's quite a story. The 7 statements is kind of all wrapped up in this poem. Fred's big mistake, what is it? Well, he thinks he's only his body. And hence his existential dread. So he has a spiritual awakening. And you can imagine where it goes from there. So I'm focused now on getting Fred published, self-published. A good illustrator, a good web designer and developer, good publicist. Anybody has any ideas, please let me know. Appreciate any suggestions you have. I'm happy to email you the poem. If you want to send me an email, I'll be happy to send you a copy. So I saw an opera the other night, Werther, and the character Charlotte, she asks, why must all life be mortal? Well, is it? Here we go again with definitions and terms. What is life? Is life only that which manifests in the flesh, in a time-space dimension, 3-dimensional time-space realm? Or is life something else, something greater? One thing I know about the cosmos is that it's not about scarcity, it's about abundance. Oh my God, we don't even know how many galaxies there are. I think we're up to about 150 billion. I don't know how many solar systems they have and how many stars they have, but probably an equal number. It's an abundant universe, no scarcity. So Werther says, you know, Charlotte says, you know, why is, she's grieving, and, you know, why must all life be mortal? That's Fred's problem, you know. He thinks he's only his body. So, you know, I met a wonderful woman in 2004, last time I was here, for the meeting of IANDS in Evanston. Her name was Juliet Nightingale, and she stopped me after one of the presentations and she said, Mr. Audette, do you think you could use your influence to change the term near-death experience to eternal life experience? And I said, oh, I love that. That's great, because even the term near-death experience has a materialistic connotation.
Yes, sir.
I said, but you know, you're overestimating my power and influence. I said, no, I can't, I wouldn't be able to do that, but I will certainly suggest it because I think it's a great term. Because life is eternal. And, you know, energy is not destroyed, it just changes form. So yes, the body dies, but life is continuous and eternal, both in and out of form, within you and without you, as George Harrison said. So much credible evidence, not just NDEs, not just past life recall, not just after-death communication. There are over 200 phenomena that speak to the issue convincingly. And if you really don't know, take time to familiarize yourself with the data and all the many miracles that are found in the data. You can't explain them in the materialist model. I've tried. I really have tried. I gave all the alternative explanations their day in court, and they don't hold water. Some of the time, yes, but most of the time, no. So you know what? I'm not going to play those mind games anymore. I don't even want to talk to the people who are still having those conversations. I'm way past that. I'm on to, we don't have the time to waste with those silly head games. Let's get on to the more important business of doing what we can do to assure an optimal future while we still have time. Okay, so I'm going to say it again. All of us who know must act on what we know. We must own what we know, we must act on what we know. These folks that raise their hands, I'm not going to put them on the spot. That really wouldn't be fair. But talk to them after we adjourn here. Find out what it would take to influence their thinking, because they are the ones we have to bring around. And I don't mean them in particular. I mean all the human beings who are filled with skepticism and cynicism. Now, this isn't a come to Jesus plea, okay? This is a come to the 7 statements plea, which in my mind is the same thing, but come to Buddha, you know, come to Muhammad, come to whatever. They're all kind of saying the same thing. Because if we don't get on the same page quickly, I'm pessimistic about the future. So I think it's our best hope of achieving an optimal, sustainable future, and I hope you'll agree. And I hope you'll take the time to talk with those who don't quite see it the same way and bring them around. And that does not make you a proselytizer. It makes you someone with courage of convictions. Not coming from faith. We've been given a great blessing in this body of knowledge. These are breadcrumbs to the great beyond, okay? It's a little trail saying, hey guys, yeah, I know the setup is that you're supposed to come in here and drink from the waters of forgetfulness, and the veil can't be lifted till you go to the other side. Plato talked about all this, and Socrates. But the bottom line is, the heavy lifting has been done for us. These people who've had these experiences, they're like astronauts going to other places. You know, they're like otherworldly journeys and voyagers coming back with these great insights to enrich our understanding of who we are and why we're here. So let's get on with it. Again, while we have time, I believe, and I say this with great humility, that the 7 statements answers effectively Einstein's call for a new manner of thinking. And he said, I forgot to add this earlier, he said, if humanity is to survive, we must develop this new manner of thinking. We have to transcend the material model and put it over there with the flat earth school of thought, because that's where it belongs. I know most of you here, if not all of you, are part of the solution, not part of the problem. So I ask you to join me in whatever way is comfortable for you to truly be part of the solution, to help Chicago IANDS, to help Eternia, to help all the kindred spirit organizations that are focused in the right manner, greater good, to replace every man for himself with one for all and all for one. Because that's the world I think we all would rather be in. I think we need to come together here and now, all the kindred spirits, seize the moment before it seizes us, to write a history that we can all be proud of, one that reflects our greatness, not our weakness. You know, I get a little saddened by the fact that it seems to me that the wrong people keep writing the history. They keep making up a history that's shameful. We can do better. We can do a lot better. Why aren't we? I don't get it. You know, I don't want any more history that impoverishes us and our planet. I want a history that shows that we're empowered to take our great capacities for magnificence and translates that into a magnificent future for Earth and all its inhabitants. So if not now, when? If not us, who? If you know of a better way, let me know, because I'll jump over to that, because that's what I'm looking forward to. I believe it's past time to leave Paleolithic man in the tar pits, clubbing each other with the fever bones, so we can start dancing on the clouds to the celestial music. We can have heaven on earth now. It's a choice. We don't have to settle for self-inflicted mediocrity and insanity. There's no reason for hunger, poverty, nuclear weapons, war. That needs to go in the trash bin of all the other lunatic choices we've made throughout our history. It's time to wake up and take stock of who we are and why we're here. For me, my actions are clear, my plan is clear and resolute. I'm going to publish Fred's Big Mistake, one way or the other, and I'm going to try to get Eternia fully funded for all the good it can do. And I ask you to join me in that effort, and I appreciate your interest and your support. Now I'll open it up for questions. Thank you. Yes, sir.
It all depends on what is the purpose of why you're here. This is one of many worlds, and the law of karma operates. So the past becomes the present, and we're sort of reaping all that and purifying the world. And the cosmos comes down to us, and our souls do seek redress, and we are seeking to bring the cosmos down here, and we are still fighting the karma of the past and finding the purpose. But this is just one of many. So we have to give meaning to our life, because everything has importance to it. You know, even though there are many worlds, this is just one tiny one, you know, but to God everything is purposeful and important, and it's the experience that we're here to go through. That's why we're here. This is the school to seek love,
Yes.
to understand that we're all one.
Yeah.
And
Well, it's a proving ground for the spirit, and it's a very primitive proving ground. And we're in kindergarten.
yes.
I personally want to go on to my doctorate, you know, and I don't want to be in kindergarten anymore. But we don't have to stay there. Again, it's a choice. We can evolve as slowly or as quickly as we choose to.
So we are extraterrestrial. We are on, this is not our base, but we're from many worlds.
Yes,
Yeah, but we're here to help this world.
yes,
And the
that's why,
extraterrestrials are trying to help us too. They're very concerned.
yes, that's why Diane does what she does and why I do what I do.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes? Yes.
Have you looked at private corporations?
I'm sorry, could you speak up?
Have you looked at private corporations, foundations
Oh.
that fit your philosophy? So many corporations now are minded.
No, is the answer. I don't know of any, I mean, I've written to Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, no answer. I've written to the Templeton Foundation, but I've written to people that I thought might resonate, but usually get no answer. So, but no, there hasn't been any, I mean, we really, the funding that's needed to operationalize Eternia is significant. And, you know, I think we, you know, I used to raise a lot of money for hospice and for public broadcasting and for the performing arts. So I'm no stranger to fundraising and what's required. And all I can say is that it's a very difficult challenge with Eternia because people don't connect the dots. They don't understand it. You've been very patient. You listened to, you know, over 2 hours of information. Trying to explain all this in a grant, and then what I focus on. There are 7 program components, each one of which is very important to the holistic strategy that Eternia is advancing. And if you take any one of those components away, it's diminished and it compromises the mission vision. So it's like an all or none kind of thing in my mind. Right? We need the money for the research, for the education, for the outreach, for the Convergence Coalition, for the technology development. I mean, this is why they shut me up in Charlottesville in November of '77. They said, oh, no, we're not going there. We're not going there yet. Let's do a little baby step. No, we don't want a baby step. We need to get on with this now so we can stop the lunacy. There was lunacy then too, but just not as much. I mean, now it's exponentially worse. So go ahead, second question.
Thank you for your work and all the best with your quest. I have a question on statement number 6.
Yes.
The last clause where it's preceded by suggesting that what we do to others we do to ourselves.
Yes.
Okay, so here comes the Jesus moment. From a secular standpoint, he was murdered, and he gave love and healing.
Yes.
And how did his murder, how did he reap what he sowed?
Okay.
My suggestion would be a period after, before the last clause.
Okay. Well, that's a wonderful question, and I will answer it this way.
Did you repeat the question?
Yes, she asked about Jesus on the cross being, in her words, murdered. What is the karma associated with that, and what, that's good.
Well, it would be, I don't necessarily agree with that truth. If you reap what you sow,
I'm sorry, say it again?
this is the way it's written with the last clause.
Yes.
Juxtaposed to suggesting that what we do to others, we do to ourselves.
Yes.
Well, if Jesus, for example, was
Yes.
murdered, whether you believe in his work or not,
Yes.
his word, what he did was love and heal others.
Yes.
So how did he reap what he sowed?
Oh, okay. Okay.
The suggestion is
All
editorial.
right. The question is, Jesus gave only love throughout his lifetime, but he was murdered. So how is it that he reaped what he sowed? So the way I would answer that is, and I'm not going to get biblical.
No, that's what I said from a secular standpoint.
Yeah, from a secular standpoint. Okay. So I wasn't there, and I don't think anybody who was there really contributed much to the historical record. But that's all we have to go on, the historical record. And he is reputed to have said on the cross, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do." Now, it's very interesting. There's a lot of stuff that apparently happened after Jesus passed. Sky was darkened, there was earthquakes, birds fell from the sky, dead people rose from their graves. Everybody was freaked out with all of this. It's in the Bible, and it's not often talked about, but it's in there. And he didn't say on the cross, "Father, open up the fiery pit and cast them all into it." He said, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." He came in, I believe, I told you earlier that, I asked the question, did I choose this work or did this work choose me? Well, my answer is it's both. It's both. Jesus came in with a certain life plan to teach unconditional love, to represent the truth that will set you free. And it wasn't just Jesus, it was, Buddha, Muhammad, and others, Confucius, Lao Tse. There were many other enlightened beings throughout history who've been a variation on the theme of Jesus. They're all preaching the same thing, compassion, love, and oneness. So Jesus knew, he knew what was in store. By the historical record, if you can give it credibility, he accepted all that. That was his fate. And he willingly went to the slaughter, even though he could have saved himself, in order to teach unconditional love. What better example is there of unconditional love than to hang on the cross, being brutally tortured for no reason? I mean, they murdered pure love. And there's a great book I encourage you to read called The Dolorous Passion of Our Lord Jesus Christ by Anne Catherine Emmerich, a 17th century German nun who was often out of body, and she brought Christ forward, and he showed her everything, and he was able to look into the hearts and minds of people, knew what they were thinking, showed that to her. And the whole thing, there's no other way it could have played out given where people were coming from, which was myopia. They were bought into the illusions of the body. The Sanhedrin, Caiaphas, they had a great ride. It was wonderful being adored and important, having power and prestige and wealth. And you don't want to give it up. That's a comfort zone. Christ threatened all of that. He threatened Pontius Pilate with the same thing. So these guys are in their comfort zone, and from their perception of reality, this guy had to go because he was upsetting the apple cart. And he knew this going into it. Could he have plea bargained with Pontius Pilate and had a different outcome? Absolutely. But he didn't. Why? Because he knew that his choice was to hang on the cross, be butchered, and show unconditional love. Forgive them, for they know not what they do. Awesome. Absolutely awesome. So, now does that mean my sins are forgiven? I don't think so. I have to pay as I go. And I believe everybody else does too. And metaphorically speaking, Christ showed the way, he showed the truth. He was an example. But no, he didn't, in that sense he died for our sins. But if I believe in him, does that mean everything is forgiven? No. The hurt and pain that I cause, I have to atone for. Now in the life review, which I think is the most important part of the NDE, when you give love and kindness and compassion, you feel it 100 times over in this review. Remember, there's no judgment going on, but you're judging yourself. And all you're getting is ultimate compassion and love in this place from Creator. You're not getting eternal damnation or any kind of external judgment. You're just getting unbelievable, indescribable love. But nevertheless, in the presence of this magnificence and this perfection, you're seeing everything you've ever done, said, thought, or felt. And you're seeing the impact that it had in the overall scheme of things. So you know, without question, the naked truth of your existence and how you impacted the whole of things. So when you give love and compassion, you're pretty proud of that. It's kind of like getting a gold star, But where you show hurt and pain, oh, you feel that 1,000 times over. And you say to yourself, I must make amends for that. You want to make amends for that because you feel so remorseful. And it was like, it's like a third grader writing on the walls with crayon. Are you going to condemn him to eternal damnation? He's a 3-year-old. No, because he doesn't know any better. And neither did Caiaphas or Pontius Pilate. Christ saw the whole thing. From his vantage point, from that level of observation, he was getting what he most wanted. Liberation, to sit at the right hand of the Father, to rejoin Creator as one. That's the ultimate ecstasy. That's the ultimate bliss. Why would you want to settle for anything less than that? So, he asked in the Garden of Gethsemane, can this cup be passed from my lip? No, man, you signed up for it. You got to see it through. And he knew the name of the game. That's why he could say, my kingdom is not of this world. Okay, I hope that answered it.
So you say you don't watch the news anymore, it's too depressing, and yet I wonder, you think of politics as certainly part of the overall picture, right? I think the election in 2000
Yeah.
stolen, and in
Yeah.
2016, you had two people that could have helped the environment, and it's gone the other way.
Yeah.
So how does just general politics, fighting politics help, or is it to not help?
Well, when I said earlier that we have to own what we know and act on what we know, it's especially important to the ruling elite, to the wealthiest among us and the most powerful among us, because they're the most lost. They're the ones making the biggest mess of things. And because they're the modern day Pontius Pilates and Caiaphas. They're murdering pure love because they're coming from myopia, tunnel vision. They have flawed perspectives of reality. So how do you give them an epiphany? Well, Eternia's got 7 different program components, one of which will work. But the point is, we're running out of time. You could throw the Pentagon's budget at Eternia today, and it's still going to take a generation or two, if not more, for this evolutionary process to unfold. But if we don't start with a high decibel level, with enormous funding, we're cooked. I don't care who you elect in 2020, because even if you get Jesus Christ himself or herself in office, when they threaten the established order in a powerful way, they will be killed, as Christ was. Same story will play out.
Kennedy, Lincoln too.
Yes. Yes.
Assuming you had the Pentagon budget, what would Eternia do? I mean, what kind of actions would be taken?
Well, there are 7 program components.
Okay?
Each one would need a department head. And I was thinking, it's funny you asked that question because I was having this conversation with Diane this morning at breakfast. Diane's been a wonderful host. She's been feeding me so well. I don't want to leave because these meals are just, this food is to die for. But anyway, the greatest challenge with Eternia is the leadership. Any organization is only as good as the people involved in it. And I have a very high standard. You got to be the change you want to see in the world, as Gandhi said. You have to come from integrity. You have to walk your talk. You have to be impeccable. So if Warren Buffett is going to give away his fortune again, he gave it away once, he's going to give it away again. I hope he doesn't give it to the Bill Gates Foundation again. But we'll see. But I wrote to him about that. But if he were to turn it all over, I already devote as much time as I can to Eternia, but I would drop everything else and just do Eternia. And my first challenge would be to find the right people to bring this concept to life, starting with the heads of each one of those program components. I mean, I know in theory, at a conceptual level, how it's all supposed to work. And I have every confidence that it will work. But there's got to be a certain gestalt around it where the people are completely ethical, honest, moral, and coming from the right place. So what I would do with the funding is operationalize those components and get the right people involved.
Let me refine that a little bit more. And let's say we take principle number 1. What does that look like, to use the military phrase, with boots on the ground? What are the boots on the ground doing that brings about the realization of principle one. for example.
Everything human creativity can conceive, with a full court press, all hands on deck. We're talking more research, many big grants to major medical centers around the world. We're talking major educational campaigns using all manner of media, being as creative as we can be, getting these messages out based on what we already know, based on the data that we already have that supports number one, and all the rest of them. You throw a lot of money at it as quickly as you could for all the good it would do. Now, I am not saying that if I had $100 billion that we could operationalize Eternia overnight. It would be a process, built one brick at a time carefully. And I'm not saying that once it's fully operational that we're suddenly going to have heaven on earth. We won't. It's a process. I just don't know what else to do. And if somebody has a better idea, I mean, the aliens would land, okay, and say, hey guys, here's the proof you need, that they can transform things overnight. But if you're leaving this to little old me and Eternia and 100 billion, I'll go about it the best way I know how, but I'm throwing everything at it, including the kitchen sink, to try and convince people that, hey, the earth is not flat, and you are not your body. I'm hoping the porn will do it, so, in large part. Yes.
Hi, thank you very much for all the words that you've spoken. I'm not used to this particular conversation, so this is great. I'm attracted to your thought of the world. It sounds just lovely. I am a Christian, churchgoer, all those things, and I don't want to be disappointing to you. I just don't see it happening. This has been going on, unfortunately, that there's this terrible flaw in human beings. And whatever this flaw is has been happening since prehistoric times.
Right.
All right, and it's not going to, as wonderful as your corporation is going to be, well-funded, et cetera, which all, it frightens me because there's going to be changes that you wouldn't want. They're going to change it, and it's going to be some more flaws, human, terrible flaws. I like the idea of making people kinder, gentler, more attentive, help the poor, get rid of disease, blah, blah, blah. That's all great. I almost see yours as this movie. It wasn't Soylent Green, but it was a movie similar to it. And if everyone was walking around perfectly until they were 45 and then they were eliminated. But it was this perfect world until, that happened. I think I love what you're saying, but please don't be disappointed if it doesn't exactly happen the way you want. But maybe you can help maneuver some things. That's what I want to say.
Well, that's beautiful, and I'm not going to, listen, Christ didn't do it, okay? I mean, one of our co-founders, I don't want to tell you, Bruce Greyson, said to me once, John, Jesus Christ couldn't do it, what makes you think you can? He said, I'm a psychiatrist, and you're starting to scare me, because it's like you've got this messianic complex. No, Bruce, I don't want to hang on a cross, trust me, I don't want to be martyred. No, I'm not Christ and don't want to be. But I need to achieve Christ consciousness to fulfill my evolutionary imperative. And I can't be attached to results any more than Jesus Christ was. He knew that he was only there for his liberation, to earn his place at the right hand of the Father, Mother, Source, Creator.
That he's getting Christ is getting his results through me and through the other Christians and those that are influenced in a positive way, thank you, to be Christians. He's getting that influence over 2,000 years later. So that influence is happening, and yes, I've had experiences, many, angels, death, near death, I've had it. I just say don't give up, but this might not be the
We're
new
not allowed to
world
give
order
up.
that you're thinking of.
It's karmic for me. And I'm disappointed by the news every day. I'm disappointed by the poor choices we continue to make when we are capable of so much better. So I will keep on keeping on, and thank you for those words of encouragement. One more question, yes, ma'am.
I just want to say that I think that that God has created an abundance in the universe, and that if we feel steered and adversely influenced by the news, we should just turn it off.
Yeah.
And we should decide. So what I do is I do something that's very concrete, is that I have a group of individuals that are other NDEs, some of them are, or just people that are awakened, that I get on a call with them and we pray together, and we have certain things that we say to be able to create anew, because the power of intention to me is very strong.
Amen. I
And
agree.
the power of emotion, and when you put that behind you, that is stronger to me.
Yes.
So, just so happens, these girls are peer people of mine, and I gave her a copy of one of our prayer things. It's not very long, can I say?
I don't think we have time, frankly. Diane, did you want to say some closing? Please, it's 5 o'clock.
So it'll be
She told me to
closed.
stop right at 5, so it's her decision.
Now, on this planet Earth, we have a unique opportunity to demonstrate what the power of passionate prayer can do. We are in a period of great upheaval, a transition to a whole new way of life. There could be no better time to gather together now in large or small groups, or by yourself, to bring peace to our changing times. The power of even one passionate voice is so powerful and important, and the prayer groups also multiply this many times over. So we say, beloved Mother, Father God, beloved Earth Mother, and all the spirits of nature, we ask your help in creating the peaceful transition for Earth. We ask the divine being of everyone who lives here to join together and create a peaceful progress. We now call upon the healing love, light and power of God within each to dissolve every past thought form, grief, belief, prejudice, hatred, fear, ignorance, and limitation of any kind, which would keep the beloved people of our world in disharmony within themselves and with each other. They are being dissolved now to the degree of readiness and willingness of each person. We invite every person here to become aware of their true heart's desire through awareness of their own inner divinity, to be continually at peace and in love with their self and with each other. So we invite every heart to be filled with love, light, and wisdom that is the truth of their being. And we invite every person here to become aware of their true heart's desire through awareness of their inner divinity, to be continually at peace and in love with their self and others. We invite every heart to be filled with love, light, and wisdom, and that is the truth of their being. And we ask the devilic spirits of earth to cleanse the lane of all past difficulties, fill it with divine love and joy. We call for any needed changes with the body of earth to take place as gently and peaceably as possible. We then bless every leader, and we see through any appearance of ignorance to the truth within, which is a wise and loving being with the courage to act for peace. We bless our entire planet. We see it coming through all the challenges in shining splendor. A people and a land in peace, prosperity, equality, respect and understanding, wisdom and love. We see each person rising into their full God and goddesshood of their being, all limitations falling away like veils, Master stepping forth to assist. Thank you, God, and so be it.
Thank you.
Amen. Thank you. What a good way to end.
Yes.
And thank you, John, for a wonderful presentation.